Hello and welcome to Spotlight Matthew for today. I'm Tim Janisewski, and today we are turning from chapter 18 of the Gospel of Matthew, in which Jesus gave that block of teaching about life in the new community. And we're going to turn to a story of conflict and testing by the Pharisees towards Jesus, as we've seen this theme of mounting opposition. But before we get that, please do note there's going to be a little marker that says that Jesus has moved from Galilee down to the region of Judea. It's actually the first time in Matthew's gospel that Matthew records Jesus not in Galilee or up north in Gentile territory, but Jesus moving south towards Jerusalem and towards the temple, towards the place where he will be handed over to suffering and death and then rise on the third day. It's an important geographical marker about how the gospel is moving at this point. But as I said, the center of today's passage has to do with a conflict, a testing of Jesus by the Pharisees. So let's jump in and read from Matthew 19, verses 1 through 15. This is God's word. Now, when Jesus had finished these sayings, he went away from Galilee and entered the region of Judea beyond the Jordan. And large crowds followed him, and he healed them there. And Pharisees came up to Jesus and tested him by asking, "Is it lawful for one to divorce his wife for any cause?" Jesus answered, "Have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female, and said, 'Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh'? So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined, let no man separate." But they said to Jesus, "Why then did Moses command one to give a certificate of divorce and to send her away?" And Jesus said to them, "It is because of your hardness of heart Moses allowed you to divorce your wives, but in the beginning it was not so. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery." Well, then the disciples said to Jesus, "If such is the case of a man with his wife, it is better not to marry." And Jesus said to them, "Not everyone can receive this saying, but only those to whom it is given. For there are eunuchs who have been so from birth, and there are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by men, and there are eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. Let the one who is able to receive this, receive it." And then children were brought to Jesus that he might lay his hands on them and pray for them. But the disciples rebuked the people. Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me. Do not hinder them, for to such belongs the kingdom of heaven." And he laid his hands on them and then went away. Well, at the time of Jesus, there were two rabbinic schools in Palestine. One was known as the school of Shammai, and the other the school of Hillel. The school of Shammai tended to be the stricter group that adhered to the letter of the law, and the school of Hillel, on the other hand, tended to adhere to what it called or would have thought to be the more spirit of the law or the intent of the law. Now, question for you. Which of these two schools do you think Jesus would have more commonly sided with, although Jesus was indeed his own rabbi who did not categorize himself with either side of these debates, but in tendency, where do you think the balance for Jesus would lie? Well, the answer is actually with Hillel, because Jesus thought that by and large that the scribes and Pharisees hung great loads and burdens of laws upon the people to burden them down that the religious leaders themselves did not adhere to. He tended to be more flexible, believing that the law was made for human flourishing, not human beings to be put in a straitjacket of the law. But on this particular topic, especially this particular topic, Jesus definitely is on the side of the school of Shammai. And we find that in our passage today. He sets the bar high with regard to the significance of marriage and the family. Here are some indicators from our passage for today. First of all, the creation mandate. Jesus twice in verses 4 and 8 says, from the beginning it was intended by God that a man should leave his parents and be joined to his wife, and they should become one. And with regard to allowing divorce, it was not so from the beginning. The creation mandate has a high elevated view of marriage between one man and one woman. Secondly, Jesus mentions that the sexual bond between a husband and wife is to be sacred. The two become one flesh in what God has joined together. And Jesus is speaking of that sexual bond and union. What God has joined together, we are not to separate. Third, when it comes to Moses and the exception clauses here, we find in Deuteronomy chapter 24, verse 1, that Moses does make a provision for a bill of divorce to be given by a man to his wife. And of course, the Pharisees say, well, if Moses permitted it, if Moses made a legal provision for it, then who are you indeed to say anything other than, yes, any cause if is possible. As a matter of fact, the school of Hillel said that even if a wife burns her husband's dinner and he is displeased with her, it's just cause to divorce her. Any reason will do. But Jesus responds and says, no, that was not intended to be the standard of God's law for marriage. It was the exception because of hardness of heart. And Jesus says the exception should not be turned into the rule by the people of God. The exception should stay the exception and nothing more. And then Jesus, of course, is very sparse and spare with regard to what exception is permissible. And he says it's due to porneia, from which we get the word pornography. It's due to sexual immorality. That is the lone exception that Jesus provides to the rule of maintaining marriage between one man and one woman. And then finally, verses 13 through 15, I think that Matthew and Jesus tag on this little section about the little children coming to Jesus right on the heels of the question about marriage and divorce, because children are a very important reason why we need to have husbands and wives, for children to be raised intact in those family units. And I think that Jesus is implying at this point that children are a really great reason why we need to do all that we can do to uphold the sacred bond between a man and a woman, and not to make divorce normative, easy, and frequent. So what's the application that we have for this? I'll tick off just a few quick things for the life of the church today. First of all, we should stand for marriage and the family, to be sure, and local churches need to be quick to do that. Second, we should offer support to husbands and wives to build up their relationships and tools to access for them with their kids so that their family units may be strong. We need to look at that in every one of our local churches, I would contend. Third of all, we need to indeed go after people whose marriages are struggling and provide resources for them to be reconciled and healed and unified with one another. If you will, Jesus gave the parable of the shepherd with the 99 safe sheep and the one that has gone astray. The shepherd goes after the one who goes astray and rejoices to find it. Well, if we had 99 good marriages in a church, which would be awesome, but one marriage was going astray, the church should go after those people in that marriage to try to retrieve and heal and bring it back to wholeness within the life of the church. Jesus also says that we should, I think, provide resources, many resources for the church family to access, not only within the church, but there's so many great resources on marriage and family available in the Christian community today. We should be experts in knowing what those resources are and making them publicly known on a regular basis. Two final things. Male and female is under identity attack in our culture today. But Jesus is very clear to say that from the beginning, God made them male and female. And I think that the church needs to continue to stand for male in the image of God and female in the image of God without the sexual confusion and gender confusion that is becoming so widely accepted in culture today. And finally, singleness. There's a good block in here about being eunuchs. That means being single. And let us not forget in the church that God blesses the church with many single people. Some single for their own choosing, some single because life has dealt them that hand, but they are single, and they should not ever be second-class citizens in the life of the church. No, they should be as much of the church family and admired and included as much as any married couple with family would be. After all, Jesus himself was single, and that is something for us to bear in mind. So there you have it, Jesus responding on the subject of marriage and divorce and family. Let's take this to heart as we continue to spotlight Matthew. Like us on Facebook, and please share us with others. We'd appreciate it very much, and we'll talk to you next time.